So welcome to this Tuesday night class of movement principles, and today my theme of exploration is propulsion. So we'll be exploring more of this inner-outer relationship that we started last week, the kind of inside sensation of the body and the outer exploration of travel or possibility, and with an emphasis on the weight of the body in order to make those pushes and shifts and propulsions in space and into gravity. So we will start, the class is kind of roughly in 3 parts. The first part will be more about activating weight, sensing it, doing something with it, more kind of free movement exploration. The second part will be a couple of the Bartenieff fundamental exercises of the sagittal pelvic shift and the lateral pelvic shift. And then in the third part, it'll be more propulsion patterns, probably exploring the kind of upper and lower connectivity of the body in the right and left halves and this kind of thing. You just enter in with your own questions and explorations of today. Okay, so feel free to not have to stare at the computer. There'll be moments where you really don't need to see what's going on. So feel free to already take your eyes away from the screen and go wide with your eyes and see the space around you. Taking in this environment that you're in today, and go ahead and see what your body wants to do within the space that you have. So it's about, it might be a very familiar space to you. How many steps is it across? Where can you be? Where are the possible places to be in this space? I mean, you could get very small and start getting underneath your chairs if you wished, but you know, it's more just a kind of you and the environment moment, warming up by sending your attention outwards. And as you send your attention outwards, perceiving the space you're in, just noticing how your body is feeling in this moment to this time of day. Maybe you've been doing a lot of moving already, maybe not so much today, but just notice what your body is calling for and go ahead and indulge it. So your body might be calling for lots of movement. It might be calling for some stillness. It might be calling for some stretchiness, taking up a full reach of the space around you. Going with what your interest is from your own sensation, your own knowledge of your body. Maybe taking some deep breaths. And as you start sensing what your body is calling for, have you dropped out of the perception of the room? Or could this exploration of what you need be in relationship somehow to the space? As if you're making a constant duet with the different things around you relative to what your body is interested in. So that this attention, somatic awareness might be an inward experience, but also an outward one. Being inspired from the inside as well as from the outside. So one more moment of whatever it is your body is calling for. Maybe you've already come down to the ground. Maybe you're still strolling in the space. Whatever you feel like doing. You feel like you can connect yourself to this moment. And no doubt you have around you, even in a big space with not so many things, there's still surfaces, there's still textures. And so be aware of what your skin is contacting. texture, the temperature. And invite more of your surfaces to make more relationships with other surfaces. And that might be the floor, but it also might be the walls. Using the membrane of skin as this intermediary between the inner and the outer, and sensitizing skin to feel this three-dimensionality of your body's form and how this malleable container can adapt. And as you continue to explore surfaces, feel free to go at whatever tempo you wish. You might start to go very slowly. Just savor the change of that contact. Or you might go a little quicker, with more of a sense of the continuity of the surface of your body. For example, the surface of the skull rolling around its volume. And so continuing to explore your surfaces of your body. It's quite hard to get your armpit to contact the ground, but you can try. What about the back of the neck? The insides of the fingers? And as you continue to explore, occasionally adding in a little rock, so that rather than pushing and continuing that roll, you begin to find a little pulse, a little back and forth before you then take it on its journey. And you might be able to push from anywhere. So you can find a little push that rocks, pulses a little bit. And we call this making active and making passive the weight in a very short sort of continuum. Activating and quite a new word, passivating, making the body passive in order to roll and push. And so there's a shift now from this malleability of skin to a slight condensing of your body's weight as you take this pulse through your body. And you can find this from different surfaces. You could be just one part, or really the whole of whatever is in contact with the ground. So that you could push and pulse from anywhere. And check in with breath. Make sure you're not holding your breath to do this. And maybe it doesn't feel like a duet with the space anymore as you bring your attention further into the sensation of your weight of body and its mass and how it can mobilize. But maybe you can still stay aware. Maybe you have to stay aware anyway, so you don't hit yourself or look over a lump. Carry on this exploration of where you can push from to find a little rock. And if it helps to make the breath a little bit more audible, to take a hiss. you release a little more in making the body passive, and extend the exhale to then be able to take in more oxygen. And occasionally find a pause as a result of a push that just keeps pushing, but you start to go very slow or very slow motion, so that you really connect to the downward thrust of the push. And so you're almost barely moving. It's like an active stillness of a push. And then you can allow it to keep going. As if someone's hit slow motion on your body and you really pay attention to that downward thrust of the push. And you see what else can happen. How do you keep maintaining a push, even when it's barely perceptible? And then how do you come out of it and go back into it, go back into another push? So sure, there'll be some muscular activation. But can you still find it with breath? And with a sense of the force going through your whole body, even if it's coming from a part. And if you haven't brought yourself somewhat out of the ground to sit or to be on all fours, make sure that you include a bit of that in your exploration. Maybe you've been lying on your back or on your sides or on your front surface with this exploration. See what happens if you find yourself coming to sit or finding a lying down place with this barely perceptible push. That then becomes more visible through movement. It's very tiny, tiny little connection to gravity. Sometimes people refer to this as grounding. I like to emphasize that we can find some movement from it so it doesn't get us stuck. And so you found this stillness, directional force, push, becoming something else. And then you found again some surface to push from, to activate from, to push that becomes the something else. And I'm curious about the something else. It might turn itself into a reach somewhere, the opposite direction of where you were pushing. Maybe it becomes a softening. And I'm beginning to relate us with this push to a kind of cycle of yielding into gravity, making yourself passive to find the push. And then maybe there's a little reach somewhere in some other part of your body, and then a softening, a yielding into gravity again. Sometimes it's referred to as a pull. So you might yield, push, reach, and there might be a little pull somewhere, not necessarily. Might just go yield, push, reach, yield. Couple more of these in your own way, exploring this push, this directional force, this condensing of your body's weight, turning on some sort of pressure, and then seeing what emerges from that. And if you feel like it's getting too heavy or too muscular, give yourself a little rock again and find a bit more flow with this. Sense of the weight of the body, the weight of the bones might be more accessible, the density. And then allow yourself to simply start rolling. Reconnect your surface to surfaces again without such a precise tracking of your yield, push, reach activity. And come into an awareness again of your whole body if you feel like you've been activating more through parts. And if you'd like to come out of the floor a little bit, if you're getting chilly and need to mobilize around the room, feel free. And notice how you feel. Maybe activating weight and pushing is very familiar. Maybe it's somehow less familiar, or not where you would go to, maybe. Okay. I'm going to show us, for those of you who have not done the sagittal pelvic shift before, this exercise that was developed by Bartenieff. She had these fundamental patterns of movement, or identifying these fundamental patterns of movement that are underlying many other kinds of movement. And we see the sagittal and the lateral pelvic shift very much in walking, but also in just getting in and out of a chair. Any sort of level change, the pelvis is going on some sort of journey with the other limbs obviously attached. So in this particular exercise, it's classically taught lying down. So I'll show it in its classical form, but you can practice this movement anywhere also. But for the purposes of now, you're lying in the supine hook position on your back with your knees bent, your feet pretty close to the sitting bones. If you're very far away, it's going to be really hard. If you're nice and close here, then it's a little bit easier for the leverage through the joints. So your pelvis is going to be going on a journey, which is a bit like launching like an aeroplane, kind of going off the ground and back down again. So this reversing motion that we were speaking about earlier. So pelvis is not going to go and then like carry on. It's leave the ground, come back up again. It's not just going up and it's not just going forward, it's kind of going along this trajectory. And there's a sense of the bowl of the pelvis not really spilling its contents as it goes. It's lifting off and coming back down again, rather than a spinal curl that you might do in Pilates or yoga. What does that look like? Well, it looks really small. That's what it looks like. And so showing it on a camera, I might have to like exaggerate it a little bit so you can see it. But know that it's supposed to be pretty small. So really my pelvis is lifting off the ground only so much that I could slide a piece of paper under. I'm not going like up here and really huge. And the weight is pouring into my feet. There's a sense of push through my feet and a reach through the knees. And then a reach through the top of the skull to bring you back down again. Have a play, explore it on your own. And if it makes no sense, I can have a look and then we can troubleshoot some more. But it's very small, but you might want to make it big in the first instance. Try not to use your hands. So all this work we've done preparing the push pattern hopefully makes it a little easier to connect to your feet here. And if it helps to take some like stamps through the feet to anchor the soles of the feet, and you might even want to take a little rock through the soles of the feet. Kind of go, okay, there are my feet. They can receive the weight of the pelvis. And let's take this shift right at the end of the exhale. And so the pelvis is becoming lighter. And there's a push into the floor, through the feet, in order to make this little glide of pelvis happen. And then you can put the pelvis back down again. And your skull might nod, or it might slide on the ground. We're waiting for right at the end of the exhale, allowing the abdomen to soften, a gentle picking up the pelvic floor. And coming back down again. Now, if this is like the first time you're doing this exercise, just getting that is great. Carry on exploring like this. But if you've been visiting the sagittal pelvic shift before, and this is not a new experience, let's say, play for yourself about where you experience the push. Right at the end of the exhale, can you find a push even from the back of the skull or the back of the shoulder blades? I'm going to encourage us to do things that are not so normal with this sagittal pelvic shift. If you're already used to it, if you're doing it for the first time, just try and get the mechanics, that's cool. But if you've been doing it for a while, what is it to use your hands? To actually not push from your feet at all and pull with your hands. And see where that redistributes the load through your body. What is it just to use one leg? Just one foot. And so the pelvis really, my pelvis anyway, sort of ends up really twisting a bit. And then 2 feet. What happens if I push more through the balls of my feet than the heels even? Can I still find a direction of travel, or do I have to find the heels more than the balls of feet? If you feel like your hamstrings are getting very tired, take a pause, take a shake, give them a little jiggle, because it can be quite exerting to keep activating through the hamstrings. And you might be asking also, why are we doing this? It is a relationship between the psoas, the deep postural core muscles, and the hamstrings. It's kind of space for the front of the hip sockets, but also an activation through lumbar spine, through tailbone, through pubic symphysis. An activation of what Bartenieff referred to as the dead 7 inches of most people. So have a little play for yourself about where you're taking this push from. And so pelvis is leaving ground and launching gently off the ground and placing itself back down again. What do you need to do to make that happen? So I think you can add a little bit more of a sense of the knees coming over the feet, Alejandro. So the pelvis is going away from your head and you're there's a little shift towards your feet. There you go. Yeah. Yeah, that's huge. Doesn't need to be that big. So it can be even smaller. Yeah. And Suzanne, you're really welcome to explore different positions with the arms. How is it to have even the palms up or the arms to the sides? And I was encouraging us to use the end of the exhale for this, but how does it work on an inhale? How does that affect your push? Do you get more propulsion if you inhale? Does it feel different somehow? And Jamie, make sure that you're definitely in parallel with your feet. You might want to take them a little narrower. And as much as I said that you could find narrowness in the feet, how is it to have your legs more externally rotated? How does that affect the push? These are other variables that you can play with, but I'm kind of wanting to make sure that people also have a sense of symmetry with the parallel feet. But sure, you could try it externally rotated with your legs really wide. How would that be? Is it possible? Does it feel weird? Yes, it does. Or even with the feet internally rotated. Might not be so nice for the knees, but you might feel something that you never felt before in sagittal pelvic shift. Okay. Take a pause, recuperate however you would like from this tiny incremental pelvic shifting. Recuperate might mean bring your knees into your chest, give yourself a little hug, roll to one side, take a stretch, just take a pause from this microscopic exploration of moving only in the sagittal dimension. Yeah, some lateral side-sidedness might be recuperative. Let's play with the lateral pelvic shift. So it's pretty similar to the sagittal pelvic shift, but instead of going only forward, there's a sense of carrying pelvis sideways. It goes up, sideways, and down, and then back up, back to the middle, and down again. So I'll show you in stages. Now it's taught in a couple of different ways. Some people teach it with the sagittal pelvic shift first, like that, and then sideways and down, and up and back and down. And some people just teach it from sagittal, from the pelvic lifting just in the middle, without the sense of the sagittal pelvic shift first. I learned it the second way, this way, up, sideways, and down. Again, up to you to play with it. Now, quite critical here is that pelvis, when you're taking it up, doesn't go so far sideways that you start to tip pelvis and it kind of goes on a strange journey where if it was water being carried, you would spill it. So there's a sense of symmetry through both sides of pelvis, pubic symphysis and navel center. So there's like you're holding something here, carrying it sideways. So you're carrying it kind of along the line of the greater trochanter, the knobbly bone in the pelvis. So you've got this axle somehow that your pelvis is sliding along and then placing pelvis down. And here's a moment to go, okay, do I feel both sides of my pelvis in contact with the floor well, or am I already really twisted? Can I feel that sense of equalness, even with this new alignment of pelvis? And then from there, the reverse journey, up, across, down. So again, very small, but we're working right at the level of pelvic floor here, finding a sense of symmetry between two sides of pelvis, two thigh bones into hip sockets, shifting sideways, placing pelvis down. With breath. Lifting pelvis, sliding across, putting your pelvis down. Okay, just that. Again, don't take your feet very far away from you, it's very tiring on the hamstrings. Make sure you're nice and close. Try not to grit your teeth, try not to use your hands. Can this be with a very easy sense of push through the feet, that directional thrust of the energy down through the feet, to find a very mobile pelvis in between. Yeah? So again, with breath support, you might want to exhale to lift the pelvis, a slight sense of inhale to carry your pelvis sideways and put it down. give yourself time to sense this connection of leaving, connection with the floor, pushing away. And if it helps to, palpate the side of your pelvis, to feel those bones, to feel like how it is to really carry your pelvis sideways without it kind of juddering all over the place, feel free to also, make contact with the bones. So there's a very subtle rotation happening through the thigh bones. And again, if this is not new to you and you want to try it with the sagittal pelvic shift first and then try that variation, feel free to do that. If this is new to you, just getting the basic actions of lifting, carrying, placing, lifting, carrying, placing is enough. And I didn't say it before, but I'll say it now. Try to do this with as minimal possible effort. Make it easy, make it small. Yeah, and feel free to make any variations or pause whenever you wish. If you want to change your base of support or do it in a different way to get that same sense of pelvis gliding. And then, of course, you're welcome to see what happens when you do take it further than is possible to keep your pelvis, on the same sense of evenness to the ceiling, parallel kind of position. What happens if you do take it very far and you would keep pushing with your feet? Where would you go? And if it feels like you're going to hurt yourself, then obviously don't go there. But as someone who can be very careful with exercises and do just the precise thing all the time, sometimes it's useful for me to go beyond where it is precise and neat and symmetrical to just know what the edges are, to see where else the push might go or to see where else is possible in my range. So let's do a little back and forth between these two exercises. You have sagittal pelvic shift, the one that's got this forward and back aspect, and the lateral pelvic shift. And play around a little bit, and then you might find yourself in maybe another place, and you can find what it is to find sagittal pelvic shift, or the return from sagittal pelvic shift, or a lateral pelvic shift in a different facing, or back on the ground. And play for yourself with the classical exercise, this precision, this quietude that you're playing with. And then where else it might want to go, recapping some of this rolling, pressing three-dimensionality of your body. And then going, oh, there's a lateral pelvic shift. Okay, so if I go from here, I'm taking my pelvis sideways. This is a big version of the lateral pelvic shift, right? I've got this action here, here. I could even keep going if I wanted to. So as you explore, noticing where you can find moments of, okay, sagittal pelvic shift is there, or it's here. a lateral pelvic shift if I wanted to. Where else can it be? So you can play for yourself, going between something that is more familiar from these exercises to something that's more of an exploration of how you just find them in something else. Yeah. And if you're not sure, feel free to have a little look, because I'm just playing around with some versions. So there's still a push happening to make these other things possible. But my sense of initiation and propulsion is really now more about where pelvis is. So hopefully you have enough information to play a little bit more freely before I throw some more ingredients in. Surfaces pushing from any different place, finding how lateral pelvic shift or sagittal pelvic shift might organize you to change level, to push your way in and out of the floor. How that might be with a large base of support if you're lying on the ground, or maybe just soles of feet as your base of support. And again, if it helps to make contact with your pelvis with the bones around the top of the iliac crest or around the greater trochanter, or even sacrum and pubic symphysis, feel free to do that. Couple more minutes in your own way. You might find different bases of support with hands and feet. And remembering that sagittal pelvic shift and lateral pelvic shift were organized partly from the feet to the pelvis. So there was this experience of pelvis over the foot and away from the foot, which might help you make some choices depending on where you are in your kinesthetic, in your space. Great, let's find ourselves back on the floor. We'll come back to some more free exploration in a minute. There's just a couple of things I'd like to share as well. One of them is the heel rock, so it should be familiar to many of you at this point, but if you're new to this one, so it's a propulsion from the heels, rocking on the balls of the heels as if you're digging a hole, except you're lying down. And so this push from heels is traveling through the midline of the body, up through the spine. So your pelvis might rock, your rib cage can be soft, breastbone can move, and the head can nod. If your head is sliding, see what you can let go of in the jaw, in the tongue. See if you can find the differentiation at the top of the skull and the top of the spine. And maybe heel rock feels quite different after having done all these pushing experiences earlier. If you're familiar with heel rock, if you're not so familiar with heel rock, don't worry. There are many ways of thinking about this, but for now we'll just get this action of ongoingness with pressure through the heels. And let's find a slowing down of heel rock gradually, making it slower and smoother and smaller, so the shift from flexion to extension can be even more subtle. So a tiny shift across back of heel happening here. Maybe noticing how one side wants to work more than the other. Until eventually heel rock is done. And you can relax the legs. And then let's find a kind of inverse heel rock from the upper body, seeing as we've given so much attention to the lower. This may be a bit much on the flexion through the arms for you, and if it is, you might want to grab a towel or something to kind of wedge underneath your hands. And if you can take your hands behind your head as if you're going to do a bridge or something, can you find a pressure through the hands to find a rock through the shoulder girdle? So that this time, feet and legs are passive, upper body active, or at least arms and palms active to make this rock happen. And then release the arms. And then have another go. See how it is to press more through the knuckle and the thumb, or through the little finger edge, or heel of the hand. See what that does to the activation of the connections through the length of the arm, through forearm, upper arm, into shoulder blade. And then go back to heel rock, relax the upper body. And then let's flip the heel rock over. So just take a little pause, come onto your front surface, and find more of a pressure through the forearms. You might have your elbows quite close to you, you might be further away with the arms. And again, find this activating and passivating for a rock through the front of the body. So it's a kind of pressure through upper body, lower body is passive. Eyes can be seeing the space again, sending your attention out. And then tuck your toes, find a rock through the balls of the feet. And then pass it back and forth from toes to hands. And see the space. See the things around you. And then we can just do a little bit of propulsion, upper lower style. So let's go. Elbows nice and close, pressing into the ground. We'll tuck tailbone underneath, bring the lower body in. And then you need a bit of space in front of you to push through the lower body, to reach with the upper body and relax down. Lower body comes in, upper body leads. And then you can send yourself back. And from this little ball, you might have enough space behind you if you press through the arms to send your legs away. You can press back a little bit. And then you might find a little pressure, a little bounce onto the hands or onto the feet. Just see what upper body and lower body can do. You might this way, have a little play, and then you might also find yourself here. Seeing how lower body can mobilize here. And then we've got this one as well. Let's do sagittal pelvic shift. Sagittal pelvic shift. So what was that? It was quite a lot of things. That was a little heel rock to find sagittal pelvic shift coming all the way over the legs. And it keeps going, so you can take a step. And then you're up and you can walk and step. Bring your pelvis with you. So there's just a few more little upper lower propulsions. You might find yourself going around yourself. So instead of sagittal, you might take that as a lateral shift. So for the next 5 minutes or so, recap where we started with this skin to surfaces, connection to the room. And then starting to find more of this pushing, condensing your body's weight. And occasionally giving yourself an active stillness to find this very slow motion experience of pressure and a push. And so we're taking this phrasing of yield, push, reach in different tempos and different timings, in different parts. You might revisit sagittal pelvic shift on your back. And lateral pelvic shift. Or you might take it into another exploration of pushing on different surfaces. Sensing your body's three-dimensionality. And how lateral and sagittal pelvic shifts come into many other kinds of movements. How can we push from different places, from different parts? And how does the push resolve itself so you can reconnect to ground and keep finding that impetus to move from this connection of your body's weight? I'm going to try and shut up for a few minutes and you can just carry on exploring. If you feel like you're missing the room, bring your attention back into the space. Have this duet with the furniture, with the surfaces, with the light. All of this inner activity, as well as outer attention. And your propulsion might end up in walking, or even jogging, or jumping, if you feel ready and warm enough for that. If there's something you haven't done yet that you'd like to do, that your body is calling for, go ahead and play. And then we'll gradually re-find the computer and make our way towards it for a little check-in with questions or comments, or if you don't want to talk and you want to keep moving, just carry on moving, that's also fine.